Kia ora I hoama, ko hui mai nei ki tēnei zuitopa ki te whakatakoto I ngā kaupapa o te fundraising in the time of COVID. Ki te whakawhanaunga hoki, ki te rongo, me te ako. He mihi nui tēnei ki tō mātou hoa hono ko Michelle Berriman ki Fins, korua ko Jenni Giblin ki Funding HQ. Ka whakaako I a mātou I tēnei wā. He mihi nui tēnei ki a koutou. He pai ki te whakatau I a koutou. Ko Ronya Ivers ahau, he kai whakahaere kaupapa ki Huie Community Aotearoa. Nō reira, hui noa I te whare. He kara ki a tīmatanga tēnei. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. He ia ki ana te atakura, he tiho, he huka, he hauhu, tihei Māori. I want to welcome you all to this hui on fundraising in the time of COVID. And my name is Ronya Ivers. I'm one of the project managers at Huie Community Aotearoa, and we're peak body for the Tangata Whenua community and voluntary sector. And I want to give a special thanks to Michelle Berriman at Fundraising Institute New Zealand and Jenni Giblin at Funding HQ, who've partnered with us to bring you this session. So it's our first session of our spring webinar series. It feels very appropriate doing a spring session today in this weather across the country. And we'll share more information with you about the other sessions that are coming up over the next couple of months later on as well. So because we're recording this session, I'd really like to ask you to all mute yourself and remain muted throughout the sessions, but there will be opportunities for you to ask questions. You can do that by putting your questions in the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen. And if you have questions that you'd like to ask, we can also unmute you as well. Feel free to leave your video on. It's really nice to see all your lovely faces and have a bit of an interaction as well. There are emojis at the bottom of your screen as well, so you feel free to use those to really just show your reaction to what you hear as well. So before I ask Michelle and Jenni to introduce themselves and talk about fundraising, we'd like to know a little bit about you and your own fundraising journey. And that will be really helpful for us to understand where you're at, what you do know, what you don't know, so that they can really tailor their responses. So we're going to run our first poll question, and you'll be able to see there will be a little window that pops up on your screen, and the question is, what type of fundraising have you done? So we are going to, there are several questions around community fundraising. Have you run events, bake sales, raffles? Have you done philanthropic fundraising? So that could be individual giving, grant making. Are you receiving corporate support or government funding, donations, koha, online fundraising, in-kind support, other or none? So really during the next hour, we encourage you to ask questions as we go through the information and really want you to gain from this session. So I mentioned, feel free to write questions in the chat. We want it to be honest and open, and there's really no wrong questions. And if some of the language that you hear today is new, that's also totally okay, and feel free to ask for clarifications as well. So what you can expect to hear is about how organizations have adapted over during the last 18 months during COVID, and also receive some takeaway tips, resources and connections and support to continue your learning and your fundraising journey. So let's have a look at the poll result. I will share the results. So you should be able to see all the results. So the majority, it's actually a really good spread across all of those. So quite a few of you, but 71% on the call have been involved in community fundraising. And then the next one is receiving donations, but 62%. In-kind support is huge. About nearly half of you are receiving in-kind support. corporate support and government funding at around 48 and 43%. Great. We're going to look at a second poll. So we'd like to ask you what your fundraising target is. So if you have an idea of what, how much money you're looking to fundraise, perhaps over the next year, give us an indication. So from between 0 to 10 up to $100,000 plus, or if you don't know, that's okay as well. So we are running this Zoom until 1 o'clock. That's when we will formally close the session, but there will be opportunities for you to stay on after this if you like. So you're welcome to stay in for perhaps another half an hour to ask questions, to talk to each other, get to know each other a little bit better. So we tend to do that with our seminars and find that really useful. So this is another way of connecting with each other. Great, so I'm going to close the poll and we'll have a look at the results. So over half of you are looking at about $100,000 plus. And then we've got kind of a mix of 30 to 50K, 50 to 80K, about 10 to 15% of you, and about 15% of you still don't know yet what you're looking at in terms of your fundraising target. Thank you for sharing this information with us. So I'd like to hand over to Michelle and Jenny, and I'll get them to introduce themselves to you as well. So Michelle, over to you.
Kia ora, and my name is Michelle Berriman. I am the Executive Director of the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand, and I am delighted to be with you today in conjunction with HUIEA and Jenny. Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Jenni Giblin. I'm the owner of Funding HQ, which is an online fundraising platform. Yeah, it's great to see you all and to have such a good turnout today. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some tips and tricks with Michelle along the way. So, and thank you to HUIEA for inviting us along.
Fabulous. Can everyone see the screen? Did that share work? Yeah, fabulous. So here we are. And contact details there. I think we would like to say from the top of the day, we do have a presentation that's quite heavily got a lot of content, more content than I would like, but we want this session to be beneficial to you. So we really want the outcomes to be what you want. So we might not get through all the slides, we might kind of take a different direction, but what we plan to discuss today is fundraising, informed leadership, keep fundraising. That's going to be our biggest message of today. And we're going to do a little bit of thinking around donors and beneficiaries. And again, right back to the beginning, I didn't go to school to learn how to fundraise, and I'm sure Jenny didn't either. And we learned by asking questions and watching sessions like this. So there is no wrong question. As we said, if you don't understand a terminology that we're using, please jump in and let us know and we can clarify that. I'm going to kind of lead this presentation, and Jenny's going to jump in with some real examples of the work she's been working on. So let's go. So, are you a fundraiser? Do you administer gifts from generous donors? So do you receive donations from generous donors? Or do you strive to achieve excellent outcomes for your generous donors? Do you build strong and meaningful relationships with your donors? Do you listen, empathise and understand your donors' needs? Do you facilitate change and help the world be a better place? And if you answered yes to just one or more of those, then I think it's safe to say that you are a fundraiser. Fundraising, one of the, there's many heroes of mine, and one of them is Ken Burnett, who is, I like to call him the Godfather of Fundraising, who 40 years ago now wrote a book on relationship fundraising. And I just got a quote here from Ken. The difference between a merely good fundraiser and a truly great fundraiser is simply that the great fundraiser knows more. That's all. And I think that is incredibly true. It's about learning what we do. You know, it's about taking actions. Learning comes from asking, it comes from doing, it comes from watching, it comes from listening, actioning, and trusting yourself, trusting your instincts, and just being able to tell your story and be passionate about the causes that you're trying to raise money for. And another comment there, when their hearts and minds first, then their wallets will follow. It's all about storytelling. It's all about understanding exactly why you're fundraising, what your purpose is. So COVID, this goes, I guess, right back to the very first lockdown, the first few weeks in particular. And for some of the bigger charities who rely on putting out a lot of mail there was a lot of alarm, and it caused a little bit of panic around the fundraising sector. People were thinking and acting with raw emotion for their fundraising. I think everyone went into panic mode, and that kind of was a natural reaction for something that nobody was prepared for. I think COVID definitely leveled out the playing field. There was no MBA or years of experience that was going to help anyone deal with this situation. But thankfully, I think over the last 18 months, that panic has settled down. And the organisations that are really thriving and surviving, they're leading strongly by resetting back to good principles of good relationship fundraising. The most important people in your organisation that are going to help you get to where you want to be are your people, the people who give you money. I know for some of you that might just be grants and trusts and funders, but they're still your supporters. You're still needing to build relationships with them. They need to understand the impact that they're making to your cause. So you have to look after whoever gives you money, whether that's a sausage sizzle or a significant grant. You make sure that they understand, then you appreciate how much they're supporting you and your cause. And how did the industry respond? This is again probably quite high level thinking, and there's a lot of words in this one, so I'm going to kind of just go through this really quickly. A lot of organisations, they stopped communicating, they stopped sending everything out. They were nervous. They didn't want to ask for, was it appropriate to ask for money when people were potentially losing their jobs? We're quite sensitive in New Zealand to our entire kind of country situation. So they reduced staff, they sacked consultants, they just stopped. And basically they were hoping to ride out the storm and return to exactly what they were doing before when the dust settles. There was the second kind of group, which short-term patching. They approached donors or whoever they knew really quickly and often with emergency fundraising requests. They were focusing on, oh no, we're going to have a big gap in our, we've got no money, it's stopped. How are we? Please help us, fill our pot full of money, or please help us, we need money. And they weren't really thinking about their donors and how they were feeling or what impact they could make. And so they were hoping to fill the financial holes and ride out the storm and then return to their previous programme of activities when the dust settled. And then there was the third group who kind of just took a breath and they thought, how can we not only survive what we're going through right now, but how can we thrive post-pandemic? They looked at their donors and their beneficiaries. When we talk about beneficiaries, so they're the kind of the people who support them and the people who benefit from the money that they raise. And so they really put their donors at the heart of everything. They were aiming to engage and retain their donors by keeping them involved in the realities of what was going on. The most effective answer was, of course, number 3. Jenni, have you got anything to add to what you saw during COVID, particularly with the smaller organisations?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tempting in a pandemic as we're currently in at the moment to just stop, because there can be a nervousness around actually asking for funding, and it seems a natural thing to do to stop and not push on. But actually, I would encourage you to keep pushing forward, because the groups that I've worked with have continued to push forward, and they're now seeing the results of doing that. And sometimes it could be something really simple, such as an email out or a phone call out to the donors just to check in and see how they're going, and see what's going on in their world, because actually we're all being impacted by COVID. So making those personal connections is really important with your existing funders.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was, it will maybe come up in a bit actually, but who's thriving, not just surviving, just as Jenni just said, those who kept on fundraising. and those organisations who focused on what they could still do that was working before COVID. This was an opportunity, I think, as well, to really focus on your organisation's core purpose. And so when we talk about that, I know many of you might just have one or, 2 or 3 in your committee, or you might have a full board that you're reporting to. But whatever stage or size your organisation is, you still have a core purpose. You still have a reason why you do what you do, and understanding why you do what you do, but more than that, the impact that you are making is really important. And I think that was a chance for a lot of organisations to go, okay, what is it that we do or we can do to beyond COVID? And again, we're going to keep coming back to this. Those who focused on their donors and their donors' needs. Again, the organisations who focused on empathy, gratitude, vulnerability and transparency. There was some interesting, there were some CEOs who'd never been on the camera before, I remember, from bigger organisations who were just making videos and showing their vulnerability. And I think they were the ones that got, a great response. We'll talk about kind of how you can engage donors through storytelling. But your stories don't have to be polished. You don't have to have big budgets to put out a really honest and authentic 30-second social media video. So, it's about being vulnerable and understanding and being empathetic towards your donors. So again, those who took a donor-based approach to fundraising and those who focused on storytelling. Just an example, and again, it's from a bigger organisation, but Forest and Bird, during the first lockdown, were about to do a telephone campaign. And they realised, thinking on their donors and being, understanding and empathetic, they immediately changed what would have been a phone call appeal to ask for donations into what they called a donor health check. So they rang their donors, knowing that a lot of them were elderly, vulnerable, isolated, and all they did was call and say, do you need any help? Do you have groceries? Do you have access to everything you need? Do you want us to pause your gift if they were regular givers? Do you want to reduce your gift? What do you need from us right now? And that will never be forgotten. Your donors will never ever forget what you did for them in times of crisis. And so that's like a really small tip on, you don't have to ring them to ask all the time, although you keep fundraising. Part of fundraising is looking after your donors. So by ringing them and checking in, they're okay. If they are somebody that gives you $20 a month, can they still afford that? We have a responsibility to make sure that they are still able to make their gifts. So informed leadership, these are just top lines. Again, back to know you make a difference, know what your impact is, and understand your donors, understand why people give to your organisation. What motivates them to give to your particular organisation, and understanding that's going to be really helpful. Focus on your core purpose. Review your operation so you can continue to be bold and take action or be agile. And this is really important. Engage your teams. You have to take everyone on this journey. If your board or your committee or whatever your organisation's size is, everyone from the top to the bottom, the chair of the board, the leader of your committee, right down to your volunteers, everyone has to be involved in fundraising. Fundraising is not for everyone. If they definitely aren't involved in actively helping you fundraise, they definitely need to understand your strategy, whether that is just small activities, whatever your strategy is. Everyone in your organisation needs to understand and be consulted on where it is you want to go. Take the opportunity to accelerate change. I think this was an obvious one. And I think particularly those who weren't very digital savvy, everyone had to accelerate and adapt to a new digital world. And it created a situation where we can accelerate change where we maybe wouldn't have before. Jenni, I know you're going to jump in on this one. I feel like I'm doing all the talking. I think there's an audience out there. Do we have any questions, Ranja?
Not yet. So yeah, just invite you all to ask questions.
One of the things I wanted to say, Michelle, just to add to that, is one of the groups that I was have been working with through COVID, is that we decided to, in terms of this is sort of discussing your idea about bringing people along with you. And I think it's really important to make sure that internal message is right before you kind of go out and reach out to your donors. So we set aside a couple of hours and did a Zoom meeting because people were, obviously couldn't meet together. And we were really purposeful about sort of saying, okay, as an organisation, you know, are we all on the same page? So we had some consensus thinking around we're really clear on our why, so that we were really sure about what we were doing, and we were really confident internally that actually the purpose was still there. So that was really important to make sure everyone was still on message. So once we had that kind of collective thinking internally, we were then in a much better position to go out and reach out to our donors and say, okay, because we were all going out to different people, to make sure our message was consistent. And actually taking the time to do that is really, really important. So get your storytelling and your internal comms right, and then you're in a really good position to go out and have a conversation with your donors. Because
absolutely.
The last thing donors need is mixed messages, and when we're living in this world where there's a whole lot of information coming across everybody's desks and screens, making sure that you have that kind of consensus thinking and that clear message out from your organisations, worth the time getting that right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things is, I think traditionally charities have always, either through the annual reports or it was all about look how amazing we are. You know, this is what we do. We are wonderful. We do that, and I think you've got to change your mindsets in this kind of new world. And it's not your job to remind people how amazing your charity is. What your job is to remind your donor how incredible they are and the impact that their donation makes to your organisation. So that is quite a big change in thinking, because, you know, you naturally want to, in an annual report, or even, you know, if you don't have an annual report, a newsletter, it's very tempting to try and get donors by showing them how amazing you are, when actually the psychology of giving is about reminding the donor of the impact they're making to your organisation. You know, we're the facilitators of change. We're enabling people who want to help causes that they desperately care about be able to make the impact that they want. And I think that's something that all charities should remember.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of a 95% about the donor, isn't it, Michelle? We can't sort of overemphasize that.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely do not stop asking, and asking well with urgency. Evidence is overwhelming. People want to give, so ask.
Can I just jump in there, Michelle? We have got a couple of questions that related to what you two were just talking about. One of them was really around really just defining what you mean by donors, and does that also mean funders, for example, government or philanthropic funders? And then the other question around that relationship building with donors, what's a sensible, reasonable timeline from start to creating your story and building relationship with donors?
Two big questions. Jenny, do you want to answer the first one?
That's the first one. When I talk about, and so we're all, I mean, this is the thing with fundraising, these sort of words and terminology that might mean different things to different organizations. But when I'm talking about donors, I'm kind of talking about everybody. So I'm talking about individuals that may give to your organization. I'm talking about any corporate partnerships that you may have. I'm talking about organizations that give you grants and central government. So it's the whole kind of kit and caboodle of anyone or any organization that supports you. That's what I term and think about in terms of donors. And then in terms of how you would kind of nurture them along and reach out to them, it is slightly different. So having a personal relationship with a donor, an individual donor, is kind of slightly different than having a relationship with a trust. But I still think, regardless, you need to also go back to those trusts and just thank them again for everything that they have given to you in the past, and for having them alongside as your partner. I think that's really important. It's probably a less intimate kind of relationship, but it's still really important for them, because what I hear time and time again from central government agencies and for trusts and foundations that give out money, they often get forgotten, and often the emphasis is purely on individuals, families or businesses that give money in terms of thanking, but it's really important to keep those relationships strong with all of your donors. So I think what you do is you might have slightly different messages or slightly less touch points maybe with a government department, but nonetheless you still need to reach out to them.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And the second question was around when you start communicating with donors. Is that where we?
Yeah, so what is a sensible, reasonable timeline from start to creating your story to building relationships? And that was, Jason was also commenting that some of the money that they've received for their charities from decreased estates. So it could be many decades to receive money.
Yeah, it's never too early, I guess, to engage and start a relationship with your donor. All donors, as you know, the FINS we're fortunate in this country, we do get to self-regulate, and I'll come towards the end, I'll talk about FINS around the ethics and things. So, you know, there are very simple things. Donors should be thanked with a formal thank you letter with a donor receipt within 48 hours of receiving a donation. So that is your first touch point. Whether I know the reporting system for government might be slightly different, but again, you know, acknowledging the receipt of the donation within 48 hours would be a really good starting point. And again, whether it's hard, whether social media is a great tool for engaging your donors, you can chat to them. The other things that understanding how your donors give to you will generally be how they want to be communicated. So if your donor gives to you via your website, they obviously enjoy you know, digital communications. If they email you, they generally would be, you know, send them an email. If donors, not anymore, unfortunately, traditionally would send a check, or they would respond to a direct mail that you've sent out, or you've maybe not done a direct mail yet, but the first time they might still respond with their credit card details. And so if they, you know, if they send it in the mail, that's generally an indication of how they would like to be communicated with. As you get up the rung and you get, you know, you've got bigger donors, absolutely, you should be picking up the phone call to your really important people and talking to them on the phone.
It's quite, I was going to say, Michelle, it's also quite a good idea when you're bringing your donors on board to sort of sit down and say with them, how would you like to be communicated with? It's quite good to ask them that question, isn't it? And
yeah,
because that will vary depending on the donor and what's going on in their world. And so that way you can kind of work out, do they want to be communicated with regularly by phone call or email, or actually do they just want to check in once a year? And so because it's that fine line between making sure they feel loved and engaged and really important, yes, but also not kind of annoying them at the same time. So
yeah, I mean,
that, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends how big or small you are. If you're small and you're starting off, you are in a wonderful position to do handwritten letters, handwritten notes, get their birthday, send them a birthday card, send them Christmas cards. But at the same time, there are some donors who are of a generation where they're thrifty. And so, you know, they might be like, why are they sending me a Christmas card? How many people have they sent a Christmas card to? So you need to gauge that yourself, you know, but there's so many different ways you can do it through birthdays, important dates, bringing them together at an event. You know, if you're just starting off, events are always a good way to introduce donors to your organisation. But again, that's an interesting one with COVID. So we are saying tell your story and ask. I think we've all heard this over and over and over again. Be bold, be brave, but more importantly, be authentic. Donors want to know that what your story is real. It's the truth told well. You know, they don't want jargon. They don't want. But also at the same time, your communications should be as long or short as they need to be. There is no right length of communication. There is, you know, there's no rules or guidelines. You've got to test these things. But be authentic, and you want them to have an emotional connection. You want to inspire them. You want to motivate them to make the impact that they want to, and you can only do that by being really authentic. But real, compassionate and believable. And the other one, the truth told well, and surprise and delight. Your donors do like to, there's some really interesting stuff going on. I had a great session actually with a group over in Canada who support children's camps, and so the children all wrote letters from camps to some of the donors, or the donors were given a map of the camp showing them all the different activities that they were doing. And it was, there's so many creative ways you can surprise and delight your donors. There's a lot of words here. So, and again, I just want to kind of summarize. At times like this, people do turn to us, and what I'm talking about is people who are in this world. We're all in this. There's something that connects all of us that are in this kind of sector. We deeply care, and so they do turn to us and what we represent. They want heroes and people they can trust. They want to be inspired. Look at Sir Captain Tom. I mean, what an inspiration. People are concerned about the future. They want to make a difference, but they also want encouragement from us. And so Mark Phillips is a incredibly well-known fundraiser from the UK, and to quote him, he says, people never tire of hearing that they've done something useful, wonderful, inspirational. And that's what we were saying before. It's so true. People need to give as much as they give to need, and that is incredibly true. And we want donors to know that being generous is, selfless giving is really good for you. It's good for your mental health, your well-being. It stimulates your brain, helps you live longer, apparently makes you have happier marriages. There's lots of studies out there around the benefits of giving, and so our job is to show our supporters directly that their gifts make a real tangible difference for others and spread smiles and solutions in a world that really does need both. So this is again a donor-based approach. This is back to focusing on the people that support you, whoever they may be. The donors will not forget you for it. That was the example from Forest and Bird. These are not normal times. In crisis, we step up. These are defining moments that will develop a friendship or a relationship friendships from relationships to transactional ones. So that means, people who might be connected with their organisation, don't really, but have never thought about giving or being involved to help fundraise. This is a time where you can help turn that into an action, a transaction, whether that's through a gift or whether that's through volunteer time, whether that's through somebody helping build your website for you, whether that's somebody, helping design your first ever newsletter or your magazine. Really tap into the people that you know and continue to build deep relationships with them. Get to know them and ask them, how are you? Listen to them, understand their position, and understand what kind of impact they want to make. And from there, you guys will be able to kind of, work out how you can work together for the benefit of your organisation.
One of the things that in there, Michelle, is that what I've done with an organisation I'm working through in COVID is that while we've all had a bit of time, for particularly when we're at home, and if some of the donors haven't been too busy, I've just checked in with them. So rather than, I haven't really necessarily asked them for funding, I've given them a little bit of an update on the project, but I've actually checked in, how's everything going in their world, how are they feeling, how's everything in their family, and actually taken that time individually with some of our larger donors to sort of find out, what's going on. And what I've found over the last sort of 2 to 3 months is that, for people that are in lockdown that aren't able to get out, some of the donors that I'm dealing with live on their own, and the elderly, and actually they really love the opportunity to have a chat to somebody new. Even some of the donors that are living with their family, but they just want someone else to talk to besides the people they've got on their 4 walls. So it's actually sort of really starting a conversation with them. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the project that we're working on, but it's just really trying to get to understand and support them while they're also feeling a little bit anxious and, a bit distressed, because it is, unprecedented times. And sometimes they just love that independent person to have a conversation with. And that's where you really build your relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think, if you and you can't do that to, depending how many donors you've got, and that's easier said than done. But I think reaching out and having those conversations is really important.
And your peers, I learned so much during COVID and made connections not only in New Zealand but globally by just saying I am stuck. I don't know what to do, but sharing ideas and saying, how can finding out who's in, similar-minded organisations, make contacts with your peers in the sector and ask them what they're doing, ask them if they've got any advice. And if you've got a board, your board are crucial. Your board should have so many connections. If your board haven't donated to the organisation, they absolutely should be asked to give a gift. Now that gift can be $10, it can be $100, but every member of your board should be encouraged, or stronger than encouraged, at some point to make a donation, because if you can then, that's showing the commitment from the top down that everyone in this organisation is committed to making this work. And so understanding whether you've got a committee or a board, they must understand their obligations to fundraising and what role they can play. And that's this next section I'm about to talk about, impact.
There's a really good saying around fundraising, Michelle, I'm not sure if you know it, but it's that either give, get, so either give money yourself, get some money in the door, or get off. And that's sort of a saying that's out there. And as you say, it doesn't have to be large amounts of money, but I think, you have to be showing leadership, and the board, it's so important for the board to do that, to either give, get some money in, or get off if they can't
Absolutely.
do that.
Yes.
It's brutal, but true.
Yeah, it is. And so this section that I'm about to, sorry, Ron. Yeah.
So before we move on to that, there were a couple of questions in the chat just around, I guess, how you get started with building your donor base, and especially kind of some practical tips around how do you go about setting up a wider donor base. So where do you start? How do you go about it? So do you have some practical tips, Michelle and Jenni, on how you go about it? How do you find out where they are, who they are? Yeah.
I'm happy to answer that. We'll have a first go answering that if you like. I think this is where getting back to that comment on the board, and I should just clarify, not every board member can financially give. So if they can't give, their role is to help get money in the door. So I just wanted to say that. So this is where your board, I think, comes into play. And not everybody sitting around your board table would be comfortable asking for funding, and that's absolutely fine. But actually what board members should be doing is looking at within their networks and the connections that they've got, and looking for potential people in your community or potential people within your wider region that would support your project. So the best way for identifying potential donors is actually spending quite a bit of time researching and finding and being really clear on your why. So what is your purpose? What's your goal? What's the impact that you're trying to make in the community? And then taking the time and using the resources you have around your board table to try and find alignment with other people in your community that share those same values and share that same desire around impact. So when there's alignment, you've got a much stronger chance of being able to get and to encourage people to give. So it's really important not to just write a list of people that have money in your community or people that have donated for other causes. You have to be really clear that there's some sort of alignment between what your purpose is and what their purpose and their values are. And the only way to do that is actually to spend quite a bit of time researching. And so go into your networks, try and find out through word of mouth the types of people that support your cause, or that might like to support your cause, or the types of people that would share your values. And this is, as I say, you were board members, and so setting time aside at a board meeting to sort of develop a list of potential donors is really important. And then using your board members to not necessarily make the ask, but to perhaps help with introductions, or to help introduce you to someone who can help introduce you to that particular person. So being quite strategic around that is really important.
Yeah, I mean, there are lists, you can buy lists. There's rules and guidelines around that, so I would advise you to consult on that. Sharing of lists it's not a big thing here, but it is overseas. The bigger charities will swap lists of donors. Now the rules again around, you can send one email as long as it's got a unsubscribe option and things. So I am not an expert in this side of it, but you can buy lists they're available. We know that a huge percentage of donors give to upwards, some donors give between 5 and 10 charities. So charities with similar kind of purposes have shared lists, and again, I wouldn't we definitely need to get the privacy laws around that and make sure that you're not doing anything that you shouldn't. The other thing is, the most obvious one is social media. How you generate, it's called lead generation, where everyone can have a Facebook or social media page. They're an obvious starting point. Your followers, your people who comment, and how you convert them into supporters or followers of what you do online into becoming donors is a whole other part of fundraising, which we do have. Finns have got, we did a webinar yesterday actually that will be up on our on-demand shop that we can make available on social media tips and tools. So that's going to be a really good place to get a lot of donors if you really have none. So just going to continue with this one. So this whole section is talks. This is about everyone. This is your board members, your suppliers, your staff, your colleagues, everyone connected to you and your organisation. You want to to let them know how they can help you make impact for your organisation. So we need to inspire them. We inspire them through your passion, your story. You inspire them to support you, grow with you, learn with you, remain with you. Just inspire them to be part of your community. We need to motivate them, and motivation comes with good comms, video comms, phone calls, authentic emails, no jargon, as I said before, and ask them for help. Ask them to help you get what you need to get done. And when we talk about videos, your videos don't have to be polished. You don't have to have a big budget. You can record a video yourself and chuck it up on social media. The more authentic, or the first time when you've got too many gaps or you're nervous, there's something endearing about that vulnerability, and that you're willing to put yourself out there and make this video. And you might feel uncomfortable. One of the biggest lessons in fundraising, if what you're doing makes you feel uncomfortable, you are doing the right thing. And so it's pushing yourself beyond just what makes you comfortable will inspire and motivate others to do the same. Oh, I am sorry. And the P is passionate. So I think we covered most of that there. If people see your passion and your commitment, they'll want to go on that journey with you. I think you'll probably have friends, or think when you see somebody passionate and somebody cares so much about what they do, you can't help but spread that passion, and that will come naturally. So you just want to be incredibly passionate, and from your board to your donors to your peers, take everyone on this journey with you. Of course, being authentic, keep it real. Being who you are, again, cross video, good relationships with suppliers and supporters. Knowing who you are, and authentic leadership or authentic organizations, when people understand what it is that makes you who you are, they understand how they can help you, and that, especially when suppliers or more and more corporates, particularly this year, might not have cash to give you, but they want to give you gift in kind. Understanding what they can give you to help you convert that into income or a way to get more donors is really important. And if you're authentic and they understand what you need, that makes the journey so much easier. And of course, care. This is about showing everyone that you care and acknowledging how important it is that they care, and reminding them why they care, and showing them that you care that they care. And care about how you approach people, as we mentioned earlier, understanding how they want to be approached. And of course, the final one is trust. This is a two-way street. Building trust takes a long time, but can be lost very quickly. Biggest thing here, own your mistakes, especially with sponsors, suppliers, funders. If you don't say, you've got to do what you say you're going to do. You've got to be transparent, open and honest. If you can't do what you say you're going to do, that's fine, but just communicate that, own it, and say, early on in my time at Finns, I made a couple of mistakes with some of our long-term, I didn't understand relationships that were long legacy relationships, and made a couple of mistakes. The first thing I did was pick up the phone, and one of them said, wow, that's the first time somebody's phoned to apologise in 15 years. That's incredible. So, you know, it's amazing how just going, I'm really sorry. But when you've got all of these things above here, if you're authentic and passionate, they forgive you because you've brought them on the journey with you.
Thank you, Michelle. I just wonder, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and we've got a couple of other questions here as well. And I wonder if we can maybe a few more minutes to people to ask questions as well. And then jump to some of the practical support that is available as well for them to access.
Yeah.
So just a couple of questions here around kind of more strategies. What are the more strategies outside individual donors? I know we talked a lot about individual donors, but something more around grants, funding, business sponsorship. And there was also a question around whether you can explain a gift in kind, what that means. And perhaps we can stop the screen sharing and maybe just have a conversation with those in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any comments around grants, fundings, business sponsorship? Perhaps Jenni has.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat through that. I think that the key thing with doing any approaches out to businesses or to trust funds, funders, etc. The key thing is, and it's a bit like going out to philanthropics, is you need to do your research. So it's the same kind of principles. Once you're clear on your why and your purpose and the impact that you're having, it's then a matter of making sure that you're doing the research to find what other funders, potential funders, be that corporates or trusts, etc., actually have a similar alignment to your organisation. There is no point doing, I don't believe, there's any point doing kind of a random big email out to people unless you've got shared values, because that's the start of a really strong relationship, as you've got shared values and you're trying to work towards the same objectives. So in terms of how you do that, I would suggest that you look on the DIA website, which under the Community Matters, they have a list of all the gaming trusts and trusts available, so you would look through there and identify and so take time to research and find out what trusts are available. The second thing, from a business point of view, again, like philanthropists, I would use your board. I would get them to reach out into their networks. I'd find out and do some research on potential businesses and find out what their values and their alignments are and their purpose and what they're doing, because actually, again, there needs to be alignment. So using your networks and doing a brainstorming session around that. And so the key thing is really doing the research, and it does take time, and it might sort of seem a little bit pointless to begin with, but I don't believe there's any point going out and asking people for money for your organisation unless they have a strong alignment to what you're trying to achieve, because you can go down rabbit holes and waste a whole lot of time and resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in terms of business sponsorship, it's an interesting one. Corporate partnerships, it might be known as it's a tricky one, and New Zealand is very much 2 degrees of separation. And if you get your story right, and if you have that, if you have your reason why, your core purpose, the impacts that they can make. If you have that kind of summarized and kind of you have your elevator pitch ready, if you can get yourself in front of someone, and you've also got to leverage business relationships. There's few altruistic giving. Everyone. We give because it makes us feel good. So we want something out of our giving, and businesses probably even more so. So understanding how you can how you can both leverage off each other and be honest about that. You're going into a meeting, and how many Facebook followers have you got? Where can you put their logo? Can you send them out? Are they allowed to send a message out to your supporters through your database? Do you have a magazine they can put an advert in? Will you tag them in a social media post? You're looking at building offerings, benefits that are mutually beneficial to both the small business, the big business. Going for your farmers, your Westpacks, that is a whole other ball game, and it is not something that the grassroots organisations are really going to get a door in. It's your local regional supporters that are going to, you want to get in front of. And again, through Jenny said, someone on your board or your friend or your neighbour or will understand who you should be talking to.
I think
we had a question, Carolyn.
I totally agree with you, Michelle, because you're wasting your time going to an ANZ in Auckland when you're a grassroots community. So what Michelle's saying is find businesses that are fit for purpose and that are similar size to your organisation, because that's where you're going to get really good impact and a good foot in the door, because it's really hopeless with those large big corporates. It's too difficult. The other thing I would say to you is that is to look at your any existing donors that you may have on board and ask them if they can help you identify other like-minded businesses or other like-minded philanthropists, because what can happen is that people tend to come on board with the cause because their friends are and they want to be part of something that other people in their community are part of. So if you've got existing donors, bring them into the loop and ask how they can help identify other potential donors to come on board as well. And be your advocates for that, because if they're already there and they're loving your organisation, they're the best people to help you sell it in.
Carolyn, you've got a question.
I've got two bits of information to share. When we were organising a raffle last year, what I found worked best was to go into our local shops and say, we're having a raffle, would you be willing to help? And there was a look of horror came over several faces. And I closely followed my opening comment with, I was thinking, could you have a think about it? If I pop back next week, could you see what you could do to help us? Giving the people a week to actually put something together, we got way more gifts than we anticipated. The other thing to share is, know what your wish list is, from, say, a $50 item to a significantly larger amount. I had a conversation where I was guest speaker at a not too close organisation, but I got told, oh, before you leave, have a talk to so-and-so. When I did, I was sounded out about what they could do to help. So I was like, didn't expect this. Asked what sort of price range might they be looking at, because we had a range of things for a couple of $100. We were looking at this for maybe closer to $1,000. We were looking at that. Said the guy, give me more information. So instead of getting, shall we say, a donation for cover stationery and general office bits and pieces, we actually got a stand-up screen to go with our data projector. And because I had suddenly thought, actually give them either extremes, we got the larger amount. I'm also an assessor for a group, and I always recommend to people who apply to us, give us options, because depending on when in the year you ask for money, you might get more if you do not just limit yourself to one item. And make sure that have the conversation with a committee member before you put in your application, and we will give you pointers as to the sorts of things that we can help with and the things to highlight in your application for that particular entity. I'm thinking, if you push that there are children involved or the local community, it makes a heck of a difference.
Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing that. Thank you. We have one more question from Diane. How do you get around asking smaller businesses for help when everyone has been suffering through COVID and lockdowns? Any idea on angles you can take? So if I can ask you maybe just a minute.
I'll just quickly jump in there. There's obvious businesses that have been doing incredibly well, like the supermarkets, the places who have remained open during COVID, the smaller local places who are loyal. they want the public to know they're still open. So although yes, they might be struggling, what can, you know, if you've got a strong social media presence and you can say, look how amazing these guys are, they still give us, you know, $50, $100. It's about recognizing them. But I would look at the people who have the smaller businesses that have been doing well.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Jenny. I just want to quickly, before we finish, I'll mention a couple of things. FINS and Huye has been working on some support that we want to make available over the next few weeks. So it will include a template kind of around elements of what a fundraising strategic plan could look like and how to fill it in. And FINS will also provide a fundraising strategic planning drop-in session from next year on a quarterly basis. So that's practical support that we're hoping to be able to provide you to help you develop a strategic fundraising plan. And we will also share with you information around the FINS membership. So they have mentoring available for members, or help you along your fundraising journey as well. Some more tools and resources that are available through their website and that we can make available through Huye as well at a reduced rate. So we want to share that with you as well coming up over the next few weeks. I talked briefly earlier about our webinar series. So there's another session coming up next week. So that's looking specifically at getting grant ready. So one form of fundraising is grant writing, writing your grant applications. And so we are working with strategic grants to help you get ready for your grant applications. And so we invite you to jump online with us again next week. And I mentioned earlier too, you're very welcome to stay on once we close for another half an hour. So I invite Jenni and Michelle to stay on. If you have any more questions, they hopefully they can stay and help answer those. But we will formally close this session. And I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Jenni and Michelle for your time and your expertise and your skills, sharing that with us, and for everybody's questions and contributions as well. So we're going to finish off with a karakia whakamutunga. Ka whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara. Kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, huie tai kie.